As we continue here on the Exam Room podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee, it is time now to tell a story of triumph, the story of someone who has overcome almost crippling pain by changing their diet, changing their lifestyle. It completely revamped not only the way that they felt, but perhaps even their career trajectory and their outlook on life. Just an amazing 180 that my next guest had, and I'm so glad that she is here to share that with you today. She's the co-founder of Mama Says. She is a friend of the show, Meg Donahue. Thank you so very much for being here, Meg.
Chuck, I am delighted to be here. Good to see you.
The pleasure is all mine. And your story is so inspiring because so often we hear from people who talk about just the fact that they are walking around in crippling pain every single day. Just getting out of bed can be a chore. And I know that at one point in your life, you too were really battling it and just taking gobs of ibuprofen.
And that's true. When we first started this journey with Mama Says, and we have a whole food plant-based company, I was my whole life an athlete, and played everything, played it in college, and then as I got older, things started to show up, and they manifested as a type of arthritis in my hips and my joints, and so I found that just kind of getting out of bed became an event. So I'd had to swing my legs out, and it would take me 10, 15, 20 minutes just to get cranked, straight. And I just thought this was the progression and the repercussions of living a kind of, active, slightly crazy life. And what happened, and this was not at all my intent when we started our company, it was for my mom's health that I was primarily concerned. But what happened, because I began eating a whole food plant-based diet, the pain started to just go away. And it was more than pain. It was also that kind of chronic fatigue. I was forever having those kind of not quite pinned downable type of disease, autoimmune diseases that, it could be this, it could be chronic fatigue, it could be that, it could be Epstein-Barr. And so I just had a host of things like that, plus pain. And I just always thought that was how it was going to be. And shortly into my time of eating whole food plant-based, and I mean within a month, I started to notice, oh my goodness, I'm feeling better. And it struck me one day I just got up from the couch, and that sounds really simple, but I did it without any hesitation or pain or wincing. And something very dramatic is happening here.
There we go. Let's actually take it back a few years and talk about what led you to having this debilitating pain that you were experiencing before you made this diet switch and things started to improve for you. You were very athletic. You played a number of sports.
Mm-hmm.
What was your life like growing up?
I had a really good life. I had, parents who loved me. I had a big family. So I had, a lot of advantages. I went to schools, I had an education, and I recognized how much I was given. And concurrent with that, I had things, I'm in my late 50s, so this was during, the 70s and early 80s, is I ran into some of the things that were really, really prevalent then, are still prevalent, but they were new. And so people didn't know a lot about it. And, things about body image and eating. And I got kind of caught up in a whole way of looking at my body and myself and eating that just, so many young women, it happens to so many young women where they lose who they are. And, eating disorders were really prevalent. It was something that I struggled with in college. And I was also, kind of a wild child. I had a great time. I had a lot of friends. I was a party girl, and what I realize now happened, because I still played sports. I did all of these things, but things started to really kind of crash down. And what I realize now, as I look back, there are things that happen physically and psychologically to you during these really tumultuous times. And what I realize now, a couple of things were going on. The first is that I have physical sensitivities to a lot of things, and I didn't realize it, and they were really causing me pain. And I know now, Chuck, that had I been aware that, wow, sugar isn't great for you. It doesn't send me off on a, a binge or something like that, but it's like a little chink in the armor of health for me. And I have a lot of things like that. I didn't know that then. And so I really struggled, and I thought emotionally, thinking it was all emotional issue, like having struggling with eating and being able to control eating or just eat normally was a struggle. And I thought it was an emotional struggle. Being physically, well, I just thought, well, you're just not doing something right or trying hard enough. And so that kind of defined a lot of my early 20s, late teens for sure, early 20s, college years, until I finally kind of hit a wake up call. And this is before eating plant based, but I think it's relevant because so many people struggle with it. Of, you just can't do this anymore. I wasn't one of those people who could like bounce back the next day. So, my life had the proverbial crash where everything just like stopped. It's like, you're not going to be able to keep on going, and you hear this now, and it's always like, things are always easier to talk about than to experience when they're difficult. And you always hear somebody say, well, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Like when my life totally imploded, and all of the dreams that I had had and the promise of a young woman who really, I was a good student and all those things had just kind of disappeared, from a combination of, food, alcohol, bad decisions. And I was young. And, when you look at it, then it just felt like this is the worst thing in the world. How am I ever going to get out of it? And I didn't have an answer. And not having an answer was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because up until that point, I had figured out ways to move around whatever the problem was. I would figure out a way. And I was out of options. And that was when it wasn't like I came to a resolution. I was just like, I was out of options. And so being out of options is they call it now surrender. But then it was just, I had no choice in my mind. It's like, I didn't know what else to do. So I had a big surrender, and I said, I just got to give this stuff up. The obvious things. And I had no idea how to do that. I had no idea how to live my life like in a kind of normal way that wasn't struggle. But I did know one thing. I knew that at some point in my life, and it had probably been when I was a very small child, I knew some basic things. I knew when I was hungry. I knew when I was tired. I knew when I was full. And I knew when I was happy. And I knew when I was sad. So those are the kind of the basic things I understood within me were there. And I just had no idea how to go find them again or let them come out. And so that's where the beginning of my shift in how I perceive myself in the world, and how I went from, I say I had to overcome a lot of advantages to get where I was, so like, but what happened, and then how I went from there to really looking at my life totally differently from a health perspective. And that certainly with food transformed my relationship to it in many ways, where I just surrendered. I stopped trying to control it and fix it, and said, there's got to be a better way. And as soon as my mind could make that shift, and this is the power of the mind, this is the place where I think if we're going to put our energy, it's to surrender. Use all of your energy to surrender, not to try and control. And so I'd given up, and I said, just show me, to whatever that was. I mean, I didn't have like a particular overwhelming faith, but I just knew it wasn't going to be me. So show me, big universe. And, it was incremental. I was a quick study and a slow learner. So things would come to me very intuitively. They would make sense, but to actually roll them into my life, it was slower. And I just, I practiced patience and that kind of daily surrender and then followed people who I had identified, hey, you're doing something that I can't do. Can you help me? And so that kind of small little choices that I made. And so when I got to the point and that helped me. That just, my life then started on a trajectory that was really the life of my dreams, of what I wanted. And so fast forward to a point where I was an adult, and the issues that my body had started to break down in ways that I hadn't anticipated. I really hadn't felt at the age that I was at the time to feel as bad as I did. And you had mentioned it earlier, I had the beginnings of macular degeneration and just all of these kind of weird autoimmune things. And that's when Whole Foods dropped on my lap, and out of my mom, who was in hospice care and very sick. And I just started researching who survived it. And so I came at it from that point of view. I had been eating a relatively, what I thought was a decent diet. But then when I went and I started eating this way, everything changed.
Well, yeah, and we're going to talk about that more in depth about that transformation in a little bit. But I do have kind of a two-parter for you right now, and I want to go back to what you were talking about, those issues with food that you had beginning in your teens and early 20s. Specifically, what were those issues, and what do you think brought them on? Was it body image issues? Was it pressure that you would put upon yourself? What do you think brought them on?
I think that's the $1,000,000 question. And I don't think it was one thing. I think, and I hesitate to say that there's a profile, like a type A personality or a looking for control. I think those things all contribute to it. I think that, ability to handle situations and like those types of emotional skills, I think are a part of it. I think, though, Chuck, a big part was that I actually had some food sensitivities I didn't know about. And the more research that, we're finding out about people who get caught up in eating disorders, and for me, it was a type of controlling of food and some bulimia. And how that came about was just a very, kind of, you hear about it from friends, and this was the 80s, so it wasn't really mainstream. There wasn't really a lot of information at all. It was really kind of clouded in shame, which makes it very hard to find your way out of, because shame is a pretty powerful muffler.
Yeah, yeah,
You just
yeah,
like, okay, I'll just stay here.
yeah,
And so I think that compounds it. That compounds being, like if you're sick, if you have a sore throat, you don't have a pile of shame on you about going and getting help. But with types of things that have to do with addiction or whether it be food or drug or alcohol, there's a layer sometimes of shame that really stops people from getting assistance with it. And so I think that was definitely true for me and many of my peers at the time. But I just was tenacious in that there's something in me that said, this is not how things are supposed to be.
mm,
I haven't always been like this. What is going on? And so I think that was the driver for me to get some sort of help. And it wasn't like, a straight line. It wasn't like, oh yeah, and then I went and everything turned out great. It was, just going a little this way, then taking a left and a right and a left and a right, but staying the course, of, I know that how I want to be in my life is somebody who, I get up in the morning, I eat what I eat, I wear what I wear, and none of it is in conflict or in relationship to, I'm not feeling like, am I on diet or off diet? I can't do that. I can't live my life like that.
yeah.
I just can't do it. I need to be free. And that was my goal. And so every decision, I think, was guided by that principle, including to surrender that I had no idea how to do it.
Let's talk specifically about what it was that you were eating during your time when you were in college, and you were playing sports. You were very athletic, and I can't imagine that having bulimia at that point was an advantage to you on the field whatsoever. I would imagine, if anything, that would have hindered your performance. But what were some of the foods that you were eating during that time, and which ones do you think that you may have had sensitivities to in hindsight?
Yeah, and probably not surprising, the like high sugar carbs, which many, that whole combination of sugar, fat, and sweet, the salt, that whole combination that is so appealing in so many foods now, that was definitely something that was like a trigger of sorts. And so, and I look back now and I think, I wish I could say to this young, because I was a young college student. I was 18, so brave to keep on going, and so much courage and so much willpower to do all the things that I did. And while with all this going on, it took so much energy. And there are so many people like that who just are under the mistaken belief that they don't have the strength or the willpower. But when you pull back and you look, and it's like, oh my God, if you can go 1, 2, 3 days, weeks, and even years going through what you've gone through and still, go to college and accomplish things, you have amazing willpower. Imagine when this is no longer an issue.
Yeah.
So, and that's what happened for me is it was definitely the high fat foods. And, there's plenty of that in college. Almost all of it was, cafeteria type food. And there's this just a smorgasbord, and then you're out late and you're drinking beer. So it all just kind of like, and beer has, alcohol has so much sugar. And so all of it just snowballed. And so something was happening to me physically that I didn't put in the equation. I did not put in the equation that a part of it was what was physically going into my body was skewing the rest of my life. I don't
Oh
know
yeah.
how, but so many people do. It's like, I don't know how I missed it. I got that, okay, if you put alcohol in your body, then you're not going to, you're not going to feel good, but you can't not eat food. So I didn't have a guiding principle for that. And so that was really a part of me just being what makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad, and being aware of those things. And so that's how the relationship with food changed very much. So, when you can give up alcohol or drugs, you learn some strategies to do so that work for, just about anything. And so they were pretty much the same principles.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you really quickly that being a food addict myself, it's I view food kind of the same way that an alcoholic does alcohol. Is that you don't have to drink alcohol, but you do have to drink some form of liquid. So you do have to eat, but you don't have to eat this highly addictive, highly processed, high fat, high sugar, high everything kind of food that puts you in that really extreme health risk category to begin with. And I think that it's high time that we start looking at things like drive-throughs and fast foods and these 2,000 calorie entrees in the same light as we do alcohol and other substances that get abused regularly, because you can't tell me that a chicken fried steak from IHOP isn't something that you can abuse, because when you eat that, daggone well you're abusing your body. So
Right.
but let me ask you, so you were the athlete in college, but did you stay active after you graduated and you weren't playing field hockey, you weren't playing lacrosse any longer?
Sure. I played tennis. I always jogged. So I always was involved in something. So that was just a part of my life. Grew up, I like sports, I like to play. And so I was always doing some part of that. And then I began to notice, that
Yeah. So you stay active for all those years. How old were you when you began to like get up in the morning and think, "Ooh, yeah, that didn't used to hurt," or "Man, it kind
oh,
of hurts to run now."
yeah. I think I was in my late 30s when weird things started to happen. My hands would hurt, shoulders would hurt, back, it seemed like I was forever had a sprained ankle, like the swelling never quite went away. And I think it's easy when things are incremental. If you're hit by a truck, these are the injuries and how it happened. But when things just kind of like pile up, um, I think it's harder to say, hey, something is going on that might be underlying all of this. And that's what happened to me. So in my late 30s, 36, 37, I would get, neck injury stuff, all of these kind of small, seemingly injuries, but together could be really debilitating. And the fatigue was just, I would say to myself, because I was eating what I thought was a great diet for me. I'm eating well, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I get enough rest. And why am I still so like tired
Mhm,
sometimes? I'm just
mhm.
like where I have to like sleep for 3 days.
What
And so
what did that great diet look like? What was that comprised of at this
so
point?
that was, and I look at it now and it's like, it wasn't so great. It was like, chicken, fish, salads, pastas, but I also was, McDonald's vanilla shakes, hamburgers, French fries, and somehow they didn't get put into what I was actually eating. When I would think about it in my mind, I would think, oh, I eat, chicken, fish, salad, some veggies, and once in a while pie. But I didn't put all of the other stuff in the diet. I don't know if other people do that, but that was me. I would just like kind of cherry pick what was good and, within reason. And so it wasn't
Yeah,
that good.
we tend to be very forgiving to ourselves, and it's really hard for us to be as critical to the person looking back at us in the mirror as we are with virtually everyone else in the world. And so it comes as no surprise that that vanilla shake didn't wind up on your diet.
Maybe on
It just
either.
it wasn't there. It wasn't there. I completely understand. It wasn't until I finally looked back and was really taking stock of every little thing that I was eating back in the day. I was like, daggone. I never really counted the hamburgers. I always counted Taco Bell because I knew that that was my big thing. But
Right, right.
the half of a chicken and macaroni and cheese and
Oh
cream
my God.
spinach and all of those things from Boston Market, not a problem. The things that I would get off of the roller at 7-Eleven, all of those taquitos and hot dogs, not a
Yeah,
problem. Didn't count. The chips didn't count. All of that
right.
stuff just wasn't even there.
Yeah, it's kind of extraordinary, but I think it's common. And so I can give myself a little bit of a pass because you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know if I would have, even if my mom hadn't gotten sick, I don't know if it would have if it would have landed on me as convincingly, because I experienced my transformation with her. And that's a part of why we do what we do, because I thought, if I can bring people hope, whether it be young people who are in the midst or struggling with some sort of eating disorder, that there is a way out that is so far beyond your wildest dreams of what is possible. And or if you're having the beginnings of a disease, whether it be type 2 diabetes and hypertension, there is a way out, and that we can either give you the food or educate you on how to do it, and the community to say, it's not weird, it's actually the most natural, beautiful way to eat, and it's super easy. It's just like so easy and fun, and you're going to feel amazing. If I can offer that hope, and that's why we started the company, because I just thought, how did I not know this?
Hmm.
I know I could have had years of struggle gone, and years of pain. And, in the case of my own family, my dad's Alzheimer's and my mom's heart disease, an awareness, you can mitigate a lot of that. And
Hmm.
so it was very compelling for me to begin to say, because I had a company and my partner had a company, and we were kind of on the other, we had sold them. And when this all happened, I said, people need to know this. This is like the golden ticket. I mean, it's just like such good news. And it's hard to believe. And it's hard to believe that it can be enjoyable. And I think that you can't underestimate how powerful it is, that if it's not going to be fun, you're not going to do it. If you're not going to like it, it's not going to happen.
Oh, and the thing is, it's like, so you said it's almost viewed as unnatural to eat the natural foods now, but that's really only a recent phenomenon. If you go
Yes.
back through the annals of history, I mean, McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, none of that stuff was around
Yeah.
100, 200 years ago. I mean, this is all a relatively new phenomenon, but it became so popular so quickly that it has become the norm in
Yeah.
recent generations. And that is why we are finding ourselves in the health predicaments that we are. And by the way, all of those foods extremely inflammatory. And I know that just to deal with your pain, you were taking a lot of
Oh
ibuprofen,
yeah. I called
which
it
was an
vitamin I.
anti. Yeah. How much ibuprofen were you taking every day?
It was stupid amounts. I was, aware enough not to take a whole bottle, but at least, 4 at a time, 2 and 3 times a day. And that's just like nuts. You think about it. I don't know how, yeah, it was crazy.
And but I bet it was normal for you at the
But it
time
was
too, wasn't
normal.
it?
It's like
Hmm.
vitamin I,
Hmm.
it's like what I did in the morning. And
Vitamin
then lunch. And before I went to bed, it was just like not, didn't even register, but that's a culture that we're in, so it's very hard. Um, to see until you've seen. And so that's why I just try as much as I can to spread this message and to let people know there is such hope and help. And it's so much easier than the life that I was living. Because when you take out the struggle, and that's, I talk a lot about surrender, about giving up what you think you know is the answer, and to be able to evaluate, answer the simple question, has it worked? Is it working? Is it working with effortlessly, without struggle? And if that isn't the case, then, be open to that. There's another way of doing things. And it begins with that decision. And I know we had a conversation, we've had them, Chuck, when you had that moment of, I got to do something different. And you make a decision, and it's hard to explain, and it's hard to tell somebody to do it, but that's really the point where everything begins, when you can say, I'm really done with what I have been doing, even though I don't know where I'm going, but I can't do that anymore. And that just, that opens something up, for me, in the universe, that allows for the next other thing to happen, other than this little wheel that we get involved in of our own decision making. So, and then the possibilities really open up.
Now, as you said, you really discovered the idea of a plant-based diet, the whole food plant-based diet, when researching for your mom, who
Mhm.
had really severe heart issues, which we've spoken about on a previous show. And I'll go ahead and link off to that conversation in the episode notes, because wow, what a story that is as well. But how old were you at this point? Because you were taking at least 4 ibuprofen at a time,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and that had to have gotten really old really fast. So how many years were you in pain and dealing with this before things started to progress and turn around for you?
Sure. I was, let's see, I was 48, 40, I was 49 and 50
Dang,
when,
more than
yeah,
10 years.
yeah, yeah. So it was a long time. And again, I know that I'm not like extraordinary. There are so many people who walk around in a type of pain, and they do their thing, and that's when I say, like, you have the strength inside you. If you can do this much that you do with this type of emotional and physical pain, imagine what it's going to be like when that is gone, when those things are no longer binding you. And I couldn't, if somebody had said that to me, I couldn't even, like, I didn't even, I was like, I just wanted to be able to get out of bed and not be exhausted, and not to have to have 5 cups of coffee and a bunch to move through the day. And I didn't want to keep thinking about it, because, Chuck, the other thing is, you get older, you're like, honestly, my life is going to be thinking about food and my relationship to it, and then you're done. It's like, I don't want that. I want it to fuel my life. I want to enjoy it. It's sensual. I want to have all that experience with food, but I do not want it to rule me. And that is not a mental process as much as it is a mental and physical process. You have to be cognizant of what goes in, as well as how you're thinking about your life. Because I needed to relearn I needed to incorporate meditation into my life, and to, chill out the maybe natural anxiety I had. Or
Hmm.
how do you work with those things? How do you, learn how to be a decent person in the world, and have a set of principles that can guide you? And those things are important, but you can't say that what you put in your body doesn't matter, so you
No,
have to
it, I
address
mean, it's so important, and it's so funny that you say, like, you didn't want food to really rule your life anymore. And
it.
to me, that just made me think. I was like, "Oh my god, she's so spot on." I almost, and you've used the word surrender a number of times. So I almost feel like, for me, I kind of just surrendered to the idea, of looking at food in a new way. And so while food plays an enormous role in my life and my career, it doesn't rule it anymore.
Right,
It's
right.
more important than it's ever been, but it is not dominating my thoughts in my life anymore. It's funny how that worked out.
It's really extraordinary. And when you can, and anybody who is caught up in it, they will recognize when I say that you're hooked on something, that it has its hooks in you, and it runs with you. Every thought, it's right there with you. And to imagine that it is not there, um, is really, it's very difficult, but that is the experience. And we hear it from so many people. And I love getting um, emails, or talking with young women, who will say, I cannot believe that I don't, this obsession is gone. This obsession. because it isn't something that you can think your way out of. I mean, I relate it to, like, if you are an alcoholic, or there's a saying that you can't get sober while you're drinking. I mean, you can't keep putting alcohol in your body and get sober. And that seems obvious, right? But with food, we don't make that same correlation. You can't keep putting things in your body that harm you. And it's not the same for everyone. But you know, if you're hooked on food, there are things that harm you and that are pulling you towards it. You can't keep doing that and try and get out of it. You got to stop doing that and then get out of it. And to be able to do that in a way that is not feeling like deprivation, because that's another thing. It's going to make you mental, and your whole life you're going to be thinking about it. But to be able to do it in a way that you are unhooked from those things, and now you're replacing your body with these things that are just fueling it and energizing you and giving you the experiences that you're trying to get with the other stuff, but that is just so short and temporary. But you get it lifelong, you know, like all day long. You're flooded, you know, with these great nutrients. Oh, yeah. That's an amazing experience, and it takes some time. I mean, I'm very compassionate with everyone trying this. I just ended up jumping into it because that's kind of the way I am, and I was desperate for my mom, and so we were all there, and so it was a little bit miraculous that I was like, holy smokes, I just solved something I hadn't even realized I was going to do.
And it'd be almost selfish not to try to help other people, seeing the transformation that not only you were beginning to experience, but even perhaps more miraculously with your mom, who her heart function was, I believe, at 10% at one
point.
Less
than 10%, yeah. And her kidneys were failing. I mean, she was hospice care, and brought her home, and she went from that, and then over a year's time, you know, gradual, incrementally getting better. We fed her a whole food, plant-based diet, very small meals. And, you know, now she drives, she got her headlights changed on her own car the other day. So, you know, she's like very capable. She swims. Before COVID, she was swimming 4 times a week. You know, she still lives here. We have a little renovated apartment here for her. And it's great. My kids get to spend time with her. You know, the other thing that happens, Chuck, and I think this is important to talk to as well. Dr. Dean Ornish talks about the 4 pillars of health. And this is something that I like to put equal credence on all of them. The food is very important. You got to get that part handled, and figure out, you know, your eating piece. But also, and then we talked a little bit about meditation and surrender to calm that inner voice inside of you, and at least be able to distinguish that it's not you, and give something so you can deal with your stress and maybe anxiety, because who doesn't have, you know, some part of that in this world. But also love and support. Exercise, a little bit of exercise. Don't have to be a triathlete. You know, go for a walk. Like, I love your story of walking, or whatever brings you joy for exercise. And then to have this last pillar, which is love and support. And, you know, and I know in talking with you and seeing the work you do, so much of what feeds you is to give away what was given to you, right? And you got to give it away to keep it. And it's that circle that, you know, our company, that's what I thrive on. I love giving people a message that there's hope, and giving them a practical way to get there, so that they can live their life in a way that is, you know, joyous and free. And that piece, that love and support, I know for me, the people who have helped me, you know, beyond all reason, who have just, you know, loved me when I didn't get it, and showed me a way, you know, and for, you know, whether your family or the family that you create, your community, that is as important as the other pillars. And it's difficult in a time of COVID, but people are creative. I mean, we figure out ways, Zoom, whatever, you get tested before you see people, all of this. There are ways to express your love and support people that will feed you. And we've found that, you know, that type of gratitude and forgiveness they're as important to me as what I put in my body. I mean, because they are what I put in my body. It just goes through another channel. So I think it's important to talk about all those things.
For sure, and that's huge. You look at the work that Dan Buettner has done with the blue zones, where
Yeah.
people live the longest on this planet, and one of the big commonalities between them is that those who are centenarians still get up in the morning with a purpose. They have a reason for getting up. They are still very much part of that community. And I would go so far as to say, though, that doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional community. You can kind of build your own community if you're not if your family isn't with you any longer. There are still so many people out there to connect with, and certainly if you're at that age, you have a whole lot to share with the world. And like I said, it'd be selfish to keep that at that point. I mean, you got to get out there, and you got to help, and it's so rewarding in that respect. And just having that purpose for getting up every day is so critical. But let's talk about the moment when you decided, like, I'm feeling so much better. I don't have to take the ibuprofen anymore. I have a background in food. I want to bring this to the world. Let's talk about the genesis of Mama Says and how all of that came to be.
Sure. It's a great question. So the way that it happened is I saw and felt and experienced what was happening, and started to help other friends. Like my sister had hypertension. I was like, her name is Sue. You got to try this. And then a friend of mine had a stroke, and so I was bringing her food, and she started to feel a little bit better. And so I could see progress with people around me. And it's more like the idea kind of kept knocking at me, rather than me thinking, I can't wait to go start a business. It was more of, wow, I think I'm going to start a food business because this needs to happen. And as soon as like I kind of recognized that's what was happening, it was like boom, boom, boom. All of these doors opened. And, I very much believe in synchronicity, and that, the universe or God has there's a co-creation that happens once you open up to it. And then things just started to unfold really quickly. Just a quick story. Once we realized we were going to have, hey, let's start this company, and we knew we needed a physical plant to produce our food, because that was important that we have control over it. We had bought a building in Brattleboro and ran into some issues with it. And we're just kicking around some ideas with a friend. And he said, hey, my friend here just happens to have this multi-million-dollar built out factory. So here, and that's about how it happened. So things have happened like that. It was so effortless. We had to put in the intention and the energy and the decision and the willingness to do whatever. But it wasn't like we were pressing. It was like doors kept opening and opening and opening. And when I put I surrendered to it. I will do my best. This feels like the right thing. And then the next thing will unfold, and I'll show up for that. And that's how we have done it since day one. And there are times, business is tough. It's scary. It's challenging. It's tiring, rewarding. But that's the principle that we roll on, is that we know the reason we're doing it, we have the right intention, and we show up and surrender what we're given, and respond to it.
Yeah, when it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And now I would imagine for you, one of the most rewarding aspects of this is actually hearing from people who have discovered you and now are experiencing the same kind of transformation that you have had, and it could be, not being in pain any longer. There are certainly a ton of weight loss success stories that come out of this, people who are improving their diabetes, like so many different things. And I'm sure you're getting feedback from so many people, and it's just got to be the most rewarding and gratifying feeling in the
It is
world.
so cool. It's the best. It's like to be able to be in any sort of way a part of somebody's recovery is so powerful. When we can share stories, you can read all the facts that you want, you can read all the studies, but what really transforms, I think, somebody's heart, or opens it a little bit to maybe what's possible, is when you can share a story of what happened. And we get thousands of emails or calls from people because we have generous, beautiful customers, and they want to share their story, and they share it with me, and we'll share it with other people, and weight loss is often a way in, because a lot of people see that as their struggle, and I get it. And I'm like, great, if weight loss is going to get you started, you're going to be so blown away, but what is actually going to happen for you? But let's just deal with the first thing that's bugging you. And if it's weight, let's handle that, because that one's easy. And I don't say that flippantly. I know issues with weight. And if anybody, so I am not like, skinny woman who never had an issue with it talking about it. I get the pain and the torture of it. And it's crippling. And so I don't want to minimize it, but the way out doesn't need to be so hard. And then to be able to share those stories, from in heart disease and people. We work with the American Cancer Institute, and people who are recovering from, and chemotherapy, and they're able to have food that nourishes them. So to just people who are busy and they're like, I want to eat better, but, I'm homeschooling, I've got all this stuff, and we just can make it easier. So all of that, and it's a blast. I mean, that's the most fun, is to be able to share and tell the story, and to hear from people whose lives they're able to do what they're meant to do and want to do in this world.
Yeah, and it was so often with the feedback that I get for the exam room, I will see a little bit of myself in that person, and it kind of just brings back these fond memories of when everything was still brand new and fresh. This transformation and almost that high that you get, and it's the healthiest high possible, because one, you truly are taking control of your health probably for the first time in your entire life, but two, you're also proving to yourself that you can, after doubting yourself in that regard your entire life. And it's so powerful. And I just love getting that feedback from people who are going through the same thing. And to me, Meg, that is better than any paycheck that anybody could ever possibly put in my bank. It is the greatest feeling in the entire world. So I love the fact that you're getting thousands of these things.
It's the part of life, we're in the holiday times where there is the spirit of the holiday. And I think that it's the piece that gets released when you begin to shift your lifestyle and the way you think and add these pieces to it, is your heart opens in a sort of way that is different. At least it was for me. And that's the experience that I hear over and over, is that to open your spirit to something. And there's like this unintended and unexpected joys that happen, and a peace that can happen. And that's just, I can't think of a more beautiful thing to be a part of and to experience. That seems to me what most people ultimately want, is that level of love and peace in their life, underlying all the other motivations to go get whatever it is on the outside. That's the piece that, when that's solid inside of us, it makes everything that much better.
And here's the coolest thing. As somebody's just getting going, naturally, I think the big concern is, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to eat this again. And it's my absolute favorite. How am I ever going to get through life without it?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you take a look at the menu that you've put together at Mama Says, you have something for everybody and their friends and their cousins and their mom and their dad. Like, your menu is enormous, and it's such good food that really you don't have to go without at all.
We really try, and everyone's welcome at our table. And I know people are at different places, and they have different mix in their family. And the last thing I want to do is to draw a hard line for somebody and say, you have to only eat this way or else you can't play. Because I know that gradual is better than not at all. And the more you eat this way, just kind of naturally, the foods that don't suit you will, and crowd those off your plate. And for your family, if you're cooking for your family, but for yourself, you'll notice a difference so quickly. And we tend to move towards what feels good. That's why we get caught up in, overeating and drinking, and because for that moment, it makes us feel better. But this ends up making you feel better and better and better. And so you kind of move towards it. And to get around people who are having a great time, who aren't judging. The last thing I want to be is shaming or judging anybody about what they do. But to support somebody if they want to move their life in a direction that feels really good, and this is a part of it, then I am 1,000% there for them.
Well, let me tell you something. For all of my burger buddies out there, the burgers that you have, Meg, are just insanely good. I mean, honest to
Thank you.
goodness, the best veggie burger I have ever had in my entire life. I mean, to borrow a phrase from a famous movie, once it hits your lips, so good. I mean, it
That's
was
so
just insane how good this thing was. And I'm not paid to say this. It is just a fact of life. These burgers are all planet good.
Oh, thank you. And they're all, yeah, they're 100% plant-based. These have a little bit more protein than some of our other products because, it's important to some folks, but we try to make it juicy. And yeah, we wanted to, you want that. You want something on a bun or however you're going to eat it. Just, it's familiar.
Don't ever change. I had it on a bun. I actually used it as a salad topping as well. I
Oh, yeah, I
grilled
did
it
that.
up and I chopped it up and I put it on top of a salad and went to town. I was like, oh my God, this now is my favorite salad. It's just so good. So thank you for bringing that to the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh man, what just an incredible story. Thanks so very much for taking this past 45 minutes to talk, and it's just been what a heck of a ride you've been on. And thank you so very much for bringing us on it and putting forth some good in the world and showing people that there is a healthier way and they don't have to take 4 ibuprofen at a time and they can truly take control of their health and not have to have food dominate their life anymore.
I thank you, Chuck, for giving me this chance because any place where I can spread this message and give people that hope, I'm happy to do it. You don't have to suffer, and you can have a life that is free from these obsessions and really live in the way that you've always known in your heart. I think everyone has a feeling in their heart of who they had hoped to be, who they want to be, who they're meant to be, and to be able to have the freedom to do that and not tied down by physical or emotional issues with food is just or health is just miraculous and a beautiful thing. So happy to help.
You don't have to suffer. Well said.
Mhm.
Thank you so
Yeah.
very much. Meg Donahue, co-founder of Mama Says. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Chuck.